It is 6:02. We're going to begin our first webinar for the Springboard Series of Educational Webinars. Coach Raymond Shay is joining us tonight, and he is presenting, and I'm so excited about this. When we started discussing as a staff the idea of doing these webinars as an educational series for coaches, students, judges, advisors, parents, supporters of speech and debate programs, Coach Shay was one of the first ones we thought of, and we knew we wanted him to give a presentation on a topic that's clearly near and dear to his heart and that he knows very well. So Coach Raymond Shay is the founding coach of the middle school speech and debate program at Princeton Academy of the Sacred Heart. He has served as the director of technology in the summer program at Princeton Academy for the last 6 years. He previously worked at LaSalle College High School, where he was the head coach of the speech and debate program for 12 years and has been a member of the NSDA for 26 years and has been recognized as a 2-diamond coach in the Honor Society. His students have been named NSDA finalists and state champions in both high school and middle school. Ray lives in Princeton, New Jersey with his wife, Corey Clark Shay, who is also a 2-diamond speech and debate coach, and their 5 children. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Coach Shay. Thank you again so much for doing this, Raymond, and everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you want to connect, there's my Twitter handle, LinkedIn, email address. Please feel free. Ask questions later, and if something comes to mind after, you can reach out. So we're going to present 5 tips for beginning a new speech and debate program. And as Kelly mentioned, I did coach high school for 12 years, inherited a very large program that I was the alma mater, that was at my alma mater. But 5 years ago, I was presented with a situation where I was at a school that had no program and was looking to start a middle school team. So these 5 tips come out of that experience, and hopefully you will find them worthwhile, whatever stage you are investigating, already started a new program. So tip number 1 tonight, focus on a few events. And I've heard so many coaches over the years say this, my wife being one of them. And it really wasn't until I started the team here at Princeton Academy that I understood what they were saying about new programs. And when you're a new program, not an established program, it's really important to kind of focus on a few events. And when you're new to speech and debate, if some of you are, don't let that entire staircase overwhelm you. Just focus on that first step, one step at a time, a few events to get you on your way. Don't let the numerous different events and various formats overwhelm you. There's a lot of events. There's also a lot of variations from state to state, but don't let all of that intimidate you. Try to just focus in on a few events to begin, and then let student interest expand your offerings, but be okay with saying not yet, right? We'll have that growth mindset and we won't say completely no, but say not yet. When you're just starting out, focusing on those few events and finding that right mix for you, for your students, and for your school is important. And this is something I had to get used to as I began a new program. Be content with just a small group of trailblazers. They might turn into a larger program later. It might stay as a small program, but no matter what your aspirations for the size of the program are, be content with that first group being a small group and celebrate them as trailblazers. So for example, 5 years ago, our middle school team began with simply congressional debate, declamation, and prose poetry. And for me, that was a nice mix, because anybody that was interested in argumentation, I could put them right into congressional debate. It was a format where I could have a lot of them in a room. I could simulate a little easier. We could talk about basic argument construction. So that worked well for us, for me. And then I had declamation as our first rhetorical public address event. Middle school is where declamation is available. Sometimes freshmen and sophomores in high school, depending on parts of the country and leagues, are able to participate in declamation. But for us, for a new middle school program, that was a great onboarding starter event for those interested in public address. And I really think over the years, I've grown to really love declamation as a starter event. Especially with the advent of TED Talks. You know, there's so many opportunities to connect with students and for them to find TED Talks that they like. They've almost all been watching TED Talks. So there's a great way to be able to kind of secretly teach them the structure of persuasive and informative speaking through a favorite TED Talk of theirs. And then prose poetry was the third category we offered. And any of our students who were interested in the interpretive events, it was a good entry point, starter place. They're both bindered events, and they're a little bit shorter. And so it was a nice, good entry events for us to get started with. Then we gradually expanded based on student interests, local opportunities, know what's offered in your area, in your state. And coaching bandwidth. Keep in mind that, as you're starting, it's okay for you to say not yet because of your bandwidth, either as a coach at a new school or as a brand new coach. And now, 5 years later, our middle school offerings have really branched out. Besides just congressional debate, we also have boys doing public forum on our team. We participated in the Pro-Con Challenge, which came out of the pandemic and has been something offered at asynchronous tournaments. And I think especially for middle school, it's a great way to teach argumentation, both sides of an issue, get students writing cases even early before they have to focus on also doing rebuttals and also all the pressures of a round. But it's been a great starting point for us. So we've expanded out of congressional debate and into those areas. Prose poetry, we moved into having our first duo team and having a few students in humorous and a student in dramatic. Still, most of our interpreters are in prose and poetry at the middle school level, but we slowly allowed that to expand as well. And now, after getting our footing in declamation, we have a lot of students doing informative and original oratory and double entering with declamation because middle schoolers still can do that. And it's really expanded our public address, but they learn those fundamental, foundational speech writing skills through getting them started in declamation. And now, in the beginning, even though I was an extemper for part of my high school career, I didn't want to get started with too much. And so we didn't even do any limited prep events. But now we're starting to get into impromptu and eventually some extemporaneous speaking. But all that is to say, start small and then start to branch out. All right, tip number 2, tap into student interests. So I was doing some work a few years ago with an international research cohort, and we were looking at voice and choice in education. And I came across this book out of Harvard Press by Jal Mehta and Sarah Fine, In Search of Deeper Learning, The Quest to Remake the American High School. And I pulled a couple quotes from this. Much of the most powerful learning seemed to occur not in core classes, but rather at the school's periphery, in electives, clubs, and extracurriculars like speech and debate. These peripheral spaces offered students real choices and time to explore matters in depth. They go on to say, students need some choice and agency over their learning, coupled with guidance from more experienced students and adults. If those pages don't describe speech and debate, they really have, from my experience as a student and as a coach, I feel matches perfectly with what they were looking for and their vision for remaking high school in America. And when we looked at, and I'm a teacher at a middle school. So when you look at student engagement, it's crazy how it's really high until those middle school years, and then it drops off and continues to drop through high school. So this is one way by giving some students some agency and connecting with their interests to increase their engagement with school. And I can't tell you how many students, how many other coaches I've talked to that will say how, hey, I went to school because of speech and debate. And students find that increased engagement, that deeper engagement, that deeper learning occurring in speech and debate. So even in the beginning, tap into those student interests. Find a time to interview each of your students if you can. I know there's so much being a new coach. If that's not possible, have your students complete a brief survey of these questions, but do this even before discussing events. Ask questions such as, what activities and hobbies do you enjoy? Make sure to explicitly ask both in school and outside of school. Lots of times students just think you care about what happens at school. You want to tap into what are they doing outside of school too? What's the most interesting thing that you have learned? And again, make sure they're telling you not just what they've learned in school. What are your favorite books, genres, TV shows, movies, plays, video games, YouTubers? I definitely expanded that list over the years, but finding different mediums and what they're excited about will help in trying to find whether they're in speech or debate. There's going to be great ways to connect with them. Have you seen any good TED Talks, read or watched any great poetry? Is there something unique about you or your family or a relative? And when you're asking all these exploratory questions, obviously keep in mind, you know, students have so many different backgrounds, and be your best educator self, know where to ask and where not to ask, but show that interest and find those student interests. I'd say definitely record and revisit those answers. I have an attendance sheet for all my practices, and over in the margins of it, I have their answers to their student interests. And the things that I pulled out of their conversation, but I continue to ask and expand on those. And I always have that with me because it's in my attendance sheet. So if I'm trying to remember, you know, what were they engaged with, or something they're not enjoying, we need to find a new topic or a new piece, I have that right there to go back to and look at student interest. And maybe something that we didn't see before, all of a sudden brings up a great idea for a poetry program, or something that can be performed in a prose, or a great new formative or a persuasive speech topic, or a topic for them to research more and submit a Congress bill on. There's just so many great ways to connect student interest to different events in speech and debate. And as a bonus, this builds that personal connection with relational learners, right? Because you're learning more about them and you can reference back to that. And even if it's something that you never end up using in speech and debate, making that connection and being able to refer back to it is going to help really create those bonds and form that community early with a new team. Tip number 3 for beginning a new speech and debate program: identify and utilize your support system. So Michael Schur, who's involved in creating a lot of my favorite shows, The Good Place, The Office, Parks and Rec, he said, you can't achieve anything entirely by yourself. There's a support system that is basic human requirement, or basic requirement of human existence. And speech and debate alumna herself, Oprah Winfrey, surround yourself only with people who are going to lift you higher. So identify and utilize people who will be your support system. Having a support system is crucial for all programs, but especially new ones. So you'll need to lean on them for meeting your team's basic needs: tournament logistics, transportation, chaperoning, judging, coaching support, fundraising. It's hard to go about all of those things on your own. The more people that you can build as a support system to help you, the better. And meeting your upper level hierarchical coaching needs, it's good to have a support system just for understanding, compassion, strength, hope. And don't just identify those needs in the support system. Be sure to actually ask for help. I'm going to say that once again for those in the back. Actually ask for help. especially when you have a new program or you're new to coaching. And each program's mixture is going to be different. I have seen programs where there's really strong school district champions. I've seen other programs where maybe that's not as strong, but their team parents are really strong. So every program's mixture is going to be different, but there's so many different ways to build that human pyramid. NSDA coach mentors. So the National Speech and Debate Association has a program of coach mentors that can reach out and help new coaches. Your state associations and your local leagues sometimes will have coach mentors, or just people who, you know, are in your area and can help you with knowing what the local events are, what the local tournaments are like, and just be a resource to lean on for all of those things that I mentioned before about logistics. Finding some school and some district champions, whether they be board members or administrators, it's great. I've seen, you know, board members who were speech and debate competitors, or the parents of speech and debate competitors and administrators. And once they understand speech and debate, you know, it'll be great. It's great to have champions in those corners. And sometimes, you know, through educational efforts, you can create some champions in your school and in your district. Faculty and staff. So if you can get some additional faculty and staff members, maybe not to commit to being full coaches, but maybe assistant coaches, maybe judges, maybe moderators, maybe just work with you on curricular opportunities to tie in. Are they doing something for April Poetry Month? Are you able to capitalize on that? You know, here at Princeton Academy, one of our amazing English teachers not only allowed me to come into his class for some research a few years ago, but then that parlayed into us making some more curricular connections with informative and persuasive. And now all of a sudden students are doing something in class and then can realize how they can translate that to competition, and helps grow a new team. Team parents. Again, depending on your team, it might be something where you want the parents heavily involved, or need the parents to be heavily involved. It might be something where parents aren't going to be involved. Every school's mixture is going to be different, but sometimes parents can serve as judges, boosters, logistics coordinators. Speech and debate alumni in your area. Again, I'm in middle school, so trying to reach out to students in high school and colleges in our area. High schools can reach out to other colleges in your area. Even if it's not your alums, there may be alums of other programs in your area looking to connect again with speech and debate. And online support. You can seek insights through a lot of different forums. The Speech and Debate Coach Forum on Facebook, I've used a number of times. It has 1.7 thousand coaching colleagues. The National Debate Coaches Association Facebook group has over 3,000 debate coaches and students. So there's places to post questions, even if you don't have someone in your locality that you can reach out to. There are some national forums. And when you meet coaches at tournaments or whatever, connect with them. Connect on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Connect with me after tonight. Get in a routine habit of kind of building a coaching network and support system that then you can reach out to with a message or a question. All right, tip number 4, leverage available resources. So in addition to leaning on that human pyramid, also make sure that you know what resources are available to you. Just like our world is fighting to make a more sustainable future, the National Speech and Debate Association, I think, has done a really good job in recent years of creating more resources to make coaching and speech and debate sustainable through more sharing of resources. So leverage available resources. Thanks to the NSDA and coaches from across this country who've been so generous in making more and more resources available. There's a newer structure and sub-navigation for resources on speechanddebate.org. And there's kind of 3 levels of NSDA resources. There's free public resources, getting started event guides, tips, drills, templates, mini lessons, blank sample ballots, sample activities, lesson plans, legislation and questions focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, big questions resources, and letters of support. So when you're on the NSDA website, speechanddebate.org, you're in the resources section, the access level, you can check free. Even if you're not a member school yet, you can check that free box and see all of the resources that are available to anyone, not just NSDA member schools. But I highly recommend becoming an NSDA member because the resources available just continue to get better and better. Deeper event guides and textbooks, topic analyses, sample legislation, practice extemp questions, tons of example videos, NSDA Learn self-paced courses, and really new these Start Here lesson plans, collection of lesson plans has been a terrific resource, even for someone with many years of speech and debate coaching experience. So if you're an NSDA member, make sure you're taking advantage of all those resources that come with your school's membership. And if you're not, definitely reach out to the NSDA and consider joining, because there's so many resources available just by joining. And then on top of that, the NSDA also has a resource package, which is a little additional to your membership. So it's an additional annual cost, but it includes a full video archive, including the most recent year's nationals, which can be really helpful for new coaches. Advanced evidence, a research guides, a sample rounds with ballots and RFDs. And I know it's resources, it's hard coming up with money for a new program, but it really, I think, has always been valuable to have the membership, and if you can, that resource package that just puts so many resources at your fingertips, especially while you may be going it alone or have a very small coaching staff. And this Springboard series, thanks to the Julia Burke Foundation, there are now more free webinars like this one and a lot of other learning opportunities. And this year there were 22 weeknight online scrimmages with free entry, synchronous and asynchronous. So some of them were, or almost all of them, had live components via the NSDA platform similar to Zoom. And then sometimes there were asynchronous, submitting a video. This really, in my opinion, has increased access and opportunities. There's really a great opportunity here for us, I think, to reach even more students, low stakes, high impact. And these came out of the pandemic and a necessity to keep speech and debate activities going. But I think there's an awesome opportunity here also to make sure that throughout the year, maybe a middle school doesn't have a vibrant local middle school league. Well, there's an opportunity to connect earlier in the year and start your season. In some of the places where I've been, a lot of the middle schools don't start until the spring, so all those fall and winter months, there's no speech and debate happening. Well, with leveraging the Springboard series, if you want to start earlier in the year, you can. And then there were winter and spring capstone tournaments. Again, free entry, thanks to the Julia K. Burke Foundation. And I'm really excited to see how these webinars and learning opportunities and online scrimmages will continue, especially hopefully to help new programs. And make sure to check your state resources too. Here in New Jersey, the NJSDL website has a number of resources. I have personally leaned on the Kentucky High School Speech League and the California High School Speech Association, even though I've never been a part of either of those. They have some great online resources. And a shout out to the Illinois High School Association. Used a lot of their videos that are on YouTube of their state champions in lessons and in practices. So check your state association and search for others. There's a lot of resources out there and available for free. And finally, tip number 5 for beginning a new speech and debate program: celebrate your students. Students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And in addition to learning about them and their interests, as we talked about earlier, celebrating them even early on will help show how much you care. And remember to celebrate milestones as you prepare for the road ahead. Wise words from Nelson Mandela. You don't need to wait for tournament successes to begin celebrating your students. Your students can and should be celebrated just for engaging with the debate resolutions, Congress legislation, speech topics, literary themes. Amazing work goes into just preparing for speech and debate competition. Share this with your community members. Share examples of resolutions or legislation that will be debated or has been debated. Share topics of persuasive and informative speeches and themes of literature. If you're emailing faculty, staff, or administrators about a tournament, make sure to include examples of those. Sometimes that's way more impactful than even sharing how well the team did. Just seeing what the resolutions and legislation and topics and themes can go so far for helping faculty, staff, administrators, and others see the value and importance of speech and debate, especially when it may be brand new to your school. Get your students to write. A lot of them may already be writing for the school newspaper or the school blog. Take advantage of that. Make sure they're covering the speech and debate team. Make sure, again, they're not just talking about tournaments, but talking about, those resolutions, legislation, topics, themes. Inform school district communications and marketing staff for publications. Lots of times they're looking for rich content like this. They want to share that out. You don't necessarily have to be the only one concerned with doing that. Loop them in, if possible, and choose what to share and how based on, your community. Maybe that's never going to be the case with district communications or social media from your school, but maybe the blog is going to be, or maybe just emails from your administrators, but sharing the great work that your students is doing. When a teacher or a head of school comes to a student and says, wow, I heard about this great topic you're working on, that not only helps your program because the administrator loves being able to talk about it, but it helps that student feel proud of what they're working on. And again, you don't need to wait for tournament success to do those things. So begin with just celebrating what your students are working on. And then in the NSDA, if you were a member, the Honor Society is a great way to celebrate students along the way through the points and degrees. I know programs that announce points and degree updates of practices in team newsletters, periodic team emails. I tend to include them in slides for student or parent meetings that I have. And celebrate with emails. The NSDA will send automatically an email saying, each week which students have earned a new degree. And I've started to make it a part of my routine to forward that on to parents and guardians and administrators to help share in the celebration of that student achieving these little milestones along the way. And in the NSDA resources, there's an invitation program script. I never used these when I was at my high school, but when I came here, it was creating something from new. Just creating the Honor Society induction ceremony had such value, I think, for our team and being able to celebrate even in the early years before there were any real tournament successes, but being able to celebrate their growth and their role in the Honor Society. And we made it a tradition here now that our graduates get the honor cords and that I give out their membership certificates with their seals and their degrees at graduation. So find your mix, find a way to celebrate, Honor Society points and degrees. Here's an example slide, really quick from one of my student parent presentations. I throw it in there, give a little update on the Honor Society, who's at what degrees. And that creates interest. I get a lot of questions. Hey, how are those points? What can I do for points? Wait, service counts? Oh, wait, can I do this? Does this count? It's great to start a conversation. And when students and parents see their name up there, that usually helps to generate more conversations. And here's an example of the email that comes from NSDA automatically to let you know a student has achieved a new level. And this is what I would just kind of forward on. And I use that as my reminder to send it to a student, copy some administrators when it's a big degree, and make sure the parents know, because I have 5 children of my own. I have worked with high school and middle school students for over 20 years. I know that they don't go home and tell their parents. So if you're able to, forwarding that on to the parents can be great to elevate their understanding of speech and debate. And again, celebrate your students. And I firmly believe in visually celebrating and creating some visual displays that help raise the awareness of speech and debate, and again, celebrate your students. So try to create a permanent display somewhere. I know that's hard or can be hard, but it actually can be easy. Find an unused or underutilized bulletin board. This doesn't have to be super expensive or over elaborate to look nice, to celebrate your students and bring attention to your speech and debate program. Here's an example. We just put these up last year, these Honor Society displays, and it's actually, I think they look great, but I designed it. We used some of the graphics from the NSDA website, and it was a great way to start celebrating what different levels in the Honor Society students had. And then we created another board for participation in the NSDA and another board for participation in our state league. And it was a great way to get started celebrating and to bring that visual attention. And those boards were only $100 or so. Bought them on Amazon and made sure that it was good with facilities and worked with them to make sure it would look nice. But it really helps to raise. But you don't even need to go that far. If you have a bulletin board, an underutilized bulletin board, there's great ways. Hang some of the membership certificates. I have mine hanging right there. Some of my students with their last names blanked out, but hang maybe the president and vice president of the team or the top 5 point earners or something like that. There's great posters always from the NSDA, the road to premier distinction, listing out maybe an update of points, having some pictures, right? Here's some pictures of our boys competing at nationals in 2021, a picture of this year's team. And I love that the NSDA has a rotating number of posters, a lot celebrating diversity, equity, and inclusion in certain months. And I love that you also have a template on NSDA to make your own posters. So this could be a great way, even if you just have a bulletin board or see an unused or underutilized bulletin board, to create, again, some visual celebration of your students and increase awareness of your team, your program. So those are our 5 tips. Hopefully hopefully all of that was clear, and we will open it up to some questions.
So, Ray, we have a question in the chat from Rahul Guha. I agree with the start small approach when I advise local new programs. I do get the question from them about how do you balance it when there is too much interest in a single event from the new students? Absolutely.
That's a great question. Thankfully for me, I felt like it really wasn't until our 4th and 5th year that we had to deal with that. Like, oh, okay, there's only 8 slots at middle school nationals. How am I going to handle this? And what I tried to also do is make it clear that, all right, maybe our older students are going to get those slots for nationals, but the younger students are learning under them, and try to create another opportunity for them to compete and maybe have another tournament where my older students are not going in those events and the younger students are getting the opportunity in those events. I also this year really utilized the Springboard Series for students getting their first experiences. They might not have known that, well, they were getting entered in the Springboard Series and the other students were getting entered in this tournament. They all were preparing for each of them. There's definitely something to be said, though, with having a mass of students competing at the same time in something. And that's why, for us, until I was ready to branch out into other debate events, Congress was a great start, because as a new program that's usually somewhere where you can have a lot of students in it, not have as high of judging burdens, not have as high of limits on which students can do it. So hopefully, you can kind of balance that, and that's where kind of why Congress was our starting point.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, it looks like we've got a couple more. Oftentimes, this is from Aaron Bassinger. Oftentimes, students at my school are spread thin. How might I go about crafting a new program that honors our school culture of trying lots of activities while still growing a moderately competitive program?
Aaron, that is a great question. I'll tell you from our experience. So at Princeton Academy, there are no athletics on Wednesday afternoons. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday are all practices and games. So I zeroed in on Wednesdays, and I was like, okay, that's going to be speech and debate. And then even on Wednesdays in our school, there's this club period. But I made sure we didn't exist in the club period. The club period was for other interests, cooking club or coding club, things like that. I made speech and debate after school so that it wasn't taking away from those other interests, and every athlete was able to compete. And still, there are some times when, right now, Wednesdays are also after school, the musicals going on and speech and debates going on. So even in those instances, we have conflicts. It's a great opportunity to talk to our students about balancing their lives. And for the most part, we've really been able to successfully do that. And I will say it's easier now, even if they're competing in person. It's great to be able to say to a student, hey, can you record yourself doing this? Because now, one, they've seen students recording themselves, or they have been recording themselves. And you can utilize those recordings, and then they don't necessarily have to have been at your practice at the same time. And I've been able to leverage coaches, some of my former students and some of my wife's former students from across the country that weren't even there for our normal practice times. Some were able to bring in virtually, but some I'm able to just send them a video and say, hey, could you give me a ballot or critique this? And so we've been able to kind of add that asynchronous element to practices, that's allowed us to be able to, let students be involved in those other things. And I do think there is a place going forward for synchronous and asynchronous tournaments to allow for more students to be involved. So I kind of took that mindset and applied it to our practices, tried to find where it fit best in our complicated schedule, but then also give grace and utilize technology to allow students to work at their own time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ray. We have another question from Leilani McHugh. Advising a new program that wants to focus on interps, what is the best way to help the program out? Collect ready-made pieces for them? Question mark.
Yeah, so certainly there's a lot of opportunities out there for collecting some ready-made pieces. But I truly think that if you engage a student in their interests and can find something that they want to present on, even my fifth grade middle school students are able to choose poetry and start to put it together. And yes, fifth graders, sixth graders, seventh graders, eighth graders, ninth graders need help from us as coaches, right? In putting together a cohesive program. But there are a lot of resources out there about how to do that. And then in the prose realm, there's resources of watching online, but you don't want to go down the route of students just copying other performances. So I really try to suggest that they find something that they love and use that. And I'll use one example from this year. We had a student who really loved a particular sci-fi movie, sci-fi book series. And I was like, how are we ever going to cut this down? And then we found a short story that originally was published in a magazine that led to the movies. And so that was a great way to say, like, oh, okay, we don't have to do too much work here. We can take this short story and cut it down. And that was way more manageable than trying to, cut a full play or book or movie script, down. So I do think that interviewing of the student interests and finding what speaks to them is important. And when you start a collection of things, you can share, within your program and get ideas from other programs, but you want to always make sure, even if it's within your own program, that there's that intellectual integrity and creative integrity, that you're not just copying what someone else has cut as a script or copying what you've seen in a video. And I think a way to avoid that is really kind of honing in on student interests. And if they're interested, they'll put in the work to put that poetry program together or that prose, cut down that short story. And I do think short stories can be a great way to have that correct arc of a story without needing to do too much cutting that an advanced coach or an advanced student is able to do with a much longer work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Hopefully that was an answer you were looking for, Leilani. We've gotten a few more questions, Coach Shay.
Okay.
All right. Rahul Guha again has a question. How do you transition those new students with drive into becoming peer coaches and leaders without it taking away from their own event?
That's great. So again, leaning on some of this, asynchronous opportunities, I've been able to say, like, hey, you're going to work with this awesome alum that I have or whoever, I need you to do a recording. And by the way, at the practice time, I need you to help with the other students. And especially because those that I'm asking to do that now have an elevated role on our team, that they have a named position on the team. It comes with that kind of understanding that they're going to help out. And it's all about how it's framed. Like, those younger students are going to work with you, and then you get to submit your video or have a separate Google Meet or Zoom session, or a separate session with me sometimes. So making sure that they feel that special attention towards them, but that they have a responsibility to also help. And I would say that my wife has done an amazing job of this, coaching a small team for a long time and really creating students. And what she has said all along is that those students who work with other students get better through that process. They understand more of the event by teaching the event. And we know that from a content perspective, right? We know that getting students up and presenting on something and teaching the class on something is going to make them learn it better. So it's just taking those things that we already know in education and applying that to coaching.
Fantastic. Thank you. You've got more questions. This is wonderful. Russell Gallagher wants to know, what are your tips for starting a speech program on a shoestring budget?
Yeah. Don't we always start them on a shoestring budget? Yeah. So getting that, making sure that you're forward thinking to, like, all right, this is where I need to get to, and I got to show the value of this. I think is really important. But how do you do it on a shoestring budget? Really make sure that whatever you're spending on has a lot of return on investment, right? So maybe you're not able to get that resource package, but just having that NSDA membership, make sure you're utilizing all of those resources, because I know sometimes, even as a seasoned coach, I was not sure of what resources were available to me until I was here on a shoestring budget and needed to lean on whatever was available to me. So make sure you're capitalizing on those. And so much is available now online and for free. Again, those state associations will share the presentation later. You can click on the links for those. Google searches and YouTube. There's so much more that's out there. So lean on those things before kind of paying too much, but continue to build up and make school administrators, parents understand that, you know, that there's a need for resources and that there's going to be some payments, just like that travel baseball team, right? Or just like that exclusive, you know, piano lessons, right? Like people pay for things, and we need to build that up and remind us that while we're balancing these shoestring budgets, that we make sure people understand that there is a cost to things. And man, the Springboard Series events, I don't know why more people don't take advantage of them. I know we have really big numbers, but I would imagine they would explode in numbers because it's free events. How could you not take advantage of that, especially if you have a very, very small budget, and constantly look at angles to improve that situation. There's a lot of fundraising opportunities. The NSDA often will have fundraising opportunities, big questions, just hosting a big questions tournament can get you money. There's a lot of fundraising partnerships. So that's what I would say is, always keep your ear out for those types of things. And I know programs that have done great spaghetti dinners and other raffles and things like that to help along with, fundraising in those early years.
Good suggestions. Thank you, Ray. We've got a couple more questions. Do you have any suggestions on how students can find sponsors, continue a program or continue a program after a coach's retirement? My alma mater lost our coach, and the program has had a hard time trying to restart. They have been traveling with other academic teams, but are struggling because they are competing without a sponsor.
Wow, yeah, it can be like starting over. It can be like a brand new program, right? Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier that there are some NSDA mentor coaches. I would definitely reach out to the NSDA, reach out to those local leagues, like just keep asking for help to keep that program alive. Make sure that the alums of that program know. And lots of times I've seen that the alums will step forward and help themselves or help find whatever needs to happen to, continue that program going. And sometimes it's a matter of organizing, making sure that there's an organized, listserv, an email chain for that group. Making those successes known and those fundraising needs known and logistical needs known, and hopefully through just continuing to lean on the alums and their understanding of the power of it, and hopefully people within the school understand. The other thing is lots of times, when there are when there are educators new to a school, they might be looking to get involved in something, and making sure that they're supported, and so that it doesn't seem too overwhelming for them to get involved, and maybe bring them along slowly to have them take over.
All right, Ray. You have one more question here, and if there are no other questions, I actually have one for you. Okay. And then we will see if any others come in, and we'll thank you for your time if there are no more after that. For high school new programs, what should be kept in mind for recruitment in the first 3 years? And then how does it change after that 3 years?
So for student recruitment, I definitely would say, be okay with it being small, right? Make sure you're okay with those early trailblazers. Make sure they understand, that it's small because they're trailblazers, and make sure that, again, they're celebrated. And the more that they feel celebrated, they're going to reach out to others. And the more that you can raise the awareness of your team in those years, it will kind of organically can grow on its own. And every school, every district has its own kind of challenges. So it's hard to really gauge that. But if you're creating that, support system with whatever mix works for your school, lean on other people to help you spread the word, to help you show others the value. And I think after those initial years, you'll see that organic growth.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions for Ray?
Actually, Kelly, can I add one more thing to that?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Let me mute myself.
You know what? Yeah, lots of schools have activity fairs, right? Where they have features on their morning TV station, or again, like I said before, the newspaper or blog. Make sure you use those things to heighten the awareness. Again, in the first couple of years, if you can get that visual display, anything like that, and trying to connect with your English teachers. Especially sometimes the history teachers, find those curricular connections or an opportunity to speak in class, or even cover a class. It's always a concern of administrators that they need coverage if you're in the school or if you're out of the school, and have the opportunity to be able to do that, to cover a class and be able to talk about speech and debate and drum up that excitement. Those are some other ways to also do that in those early years.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions before I ask mine? Does anybody else have anything? I think Ray's doing a great job of being very thorough and answering all of our questions.
These are some great questions.
I know they are good. So I wanted to know, very similar to the last question I was just asked that was, specific to high school. Can you give us a little insight into middle school? Have you found that you need to do things differently when starting a middle school program, or maybe with connecting or engaging with middle school students than you've had to do with your high school coaching?
For sure. It was quite a transition from high school to middle school. One thing that I thought was that I was going to have to lower my expectations for the middle schoolers, and it couldn't be further from the truth, actually. I think a lot of my middle school students are able to do things that I sometimes would question whether my freshmen, right, would be able to do as well. And they'll surprise you. So definitely not lowering your expectations like I thought. And then for middle schoolers, being prepared to say the same thing many times and to share it many different ways. Verbally, share it in print, share it in email, share it again. Especially when it's new, and don't assume an understanding. And even once you think they have an understanding, continue to share again. That there's just a need for that kind of repetition until it kind of gets into like what this is all about. When you're starting a middle school basketball team, most of the students probably understand what basketball is, right? You might have a few who've never played before, but they might have or probably saw a game before, right? If they're showing up. That's not necessarily always the case with speech and debate, and especially not with middle schoolers. They really might not have. So saying things over and over, not assuming some basic knowledge of it, and showing the example videos. There's not just high school example videos, there's middle school example videos. And sometimes showing just the high school videos can be intimidating, and I learned that. And showing the middle school videos will make them a little more comfortable with that level, and then also show the high school videos so that they're striving for that excellence as well, and learning from that as well. But those are some of my thoughts on how it was different for middle school.
Thank you so much for taking time to answer all of our questions and for doing such a great presentation tonight.
Oh, thanks, Kelly. Thank you so much for all your work on the Springboard series. It really has been awesome. My students love these tournaments. I loved judging them, and I'm so glad that there's now some of these free webinars and other online resources.
Well, can I tell you how much I was just swelling with pride listening to you talk about Springboard and the generosity of the Julia Burke Foundation. It feels really good, and I'm very happy to see so many of our coaches who participated here tonight, and I really do hope that you'll join us. We have 3 more webinars coming up. Here are Coach Shay's contact informations and socials that you can follow him. But you're also welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions about any of our upcoming webinars, if you have any questions about the Last Chance Qualifier or the Springboard series for next year. And I think we have one chat. Thank you. Very helpful information. Yes, it was wonderful. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thanks for the great questions.
Yeah, this was wonderful. I'm going to end it for everyone now. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you again.
Take care. Thanks, Kel.
Bye.